Everybody. I want to.
Thank you, Liami. Now you can start.
Okay, I got it. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to this Zoom meeting. I just wanted to thank everybody on behalf of Kipolim. You guys are saving and changing lives every day. You guys are heroes. I thank you guys so much because a lot of times, getting this off the ground so quickly and we experienced so many glitches. And now, Baruch Hashem, we're ready to start advertising full swing ahead. And in the next few weeks, we'll be busy promoting it with press releases and advertising all over. And you guys are going to be kept real busy. So thank you guys so much for doing chesed, mitzvot, and just being amazing people in this time when the country needs all of us. So thank you guys.
Okay, so thank you, Liami. We're hoping that Speaker, who is our chairman, may be able to pop into this meeting at some stage this evening, but he's actually stationed in Gaza. So he's actually rather busy at the moment, but if he's able to, he will join us briefly for a few moments. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to introduce Lari to you. Lari is from the USA originally. She fled to Israel a long time ago with her three children. She ran away from a very abusive relationship and a very abusive marriage, and Israel was her saving grace. I've had the great fortune of knowing Lari now for some time, and she's now living in America at the moment, but hopes one day to return to Israel. So I'd like to welcome you, and I'd like you to talk to me. Thank you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you for the honor and opportunity to be part of this event. There's so many things happening in our world today that it seems to take our breath away on a daily basis. Each of us has a very private, yet sometimes we have it in common, the way we face, deal with, or manage the tragedies, the traumas, or the challenges that come into our life. I've been asked to share my journey today, and for that I'm grateful, because at 61 years old, I do believe that my past, my present experiences, although they've been painful and filled with challenges, there's always been a light at the end of the tunnel, which has come through the best of humanity, especially through the state and the people of Israel. My future is dedicated to sharing our family's story in the hope of encouraging others through faith and believing that no matter our current circumstances, we're here to learn lessons, sometimes that we might not be prepared to learn, but the stronger that we believe in that, the more chance of survival and thriving that we have. As Susan said, in 2014, my three children and I, we fled California due to domestic violence and child abuse. We tried for many years to live with the abuse. We were told to minimize it, manage it ourselves. We've stayed in domestic violence shelters. My children were placed into protective custody, and there were restraining orders that were put into place. While the abuse was clearly documented, we were sometimes blamed for the abuse and how we responded to it. There's a part here where I wanted to bring in the connection of my own experience with what I believe, what Israel experiences. Ours is obviously on a different level, but we were being terrorized on a daily basis in our home. My ex-husband moved into the home behind us. And again, it was minimized. I had to put up security fences, security cameras. We tried at every level to reach out to the resources that were in place that were supposed to protect us, but things didn't work out. My children were tied up, forced to eat out of the garbage, hit, punched, threatened, and much more. All of this was documented. We eventually had to move to another house. He found that house. He was arrested for stalking. There were photos of that home. found inside his home. But because he was an attorney, charges were never filed. The DA never filed the charges. At the time we went into the first shelter, we were told you need to leave because our dog was shot, and the homicide detective at the time said he's front loading his alibi. You need to leave the area. At that point in time in my life, that recommendation was outrageous. I couldn't imagine leaving my friends, my family, my job. I was a teacher for a school district. It didn't make sense. But unfortunately, my ex-husband's mental health deteriorated. And one day my children came home and they said that he had a gun and he was using it to discipline them. He was putting it to their heads and to their backs. And he was threatening my children that if they didn't do what he was telling them to do, they would go back to foster care, or worse, we would all be shot and buried in the desert. As his mental health deteriorated, the children and I were determined to manage it on our own, but it just didn't work that way. And when my sons asked me to take them away because of the gun violence, I said yes. I didn't even know where we were going to go at that point in time. My youngest daughter, Amy, she hadn't experienced the gun against her back and head, but she had witnessed it. Both of my sons, Adam and Zachary, explained to me that it was going to be him or us. And I said, okay, we'll go. We packed our bags. We each had a suitcase with clothing, and I had an additional suitcase with court documents. We weren't sure where we were going to go at that time, and we did have passports. Both of my sons had just celebrated their bar mitzvahs together, even though they were 2 years apart, and they asked about going to Israel. None of us had ever been there. We didn't speak Hebrew. My thought at the time was, because nothing on earth made sense. So if we could make it to Israel, we would get to the wall, we would make our prayers, put them in the wall, and ask God for help. And that's exactly what we did. We arrived in Israel in May of 2014. We went and put our prayers in, and we prayed for a miracle. Not only did that miracle happen, but after our arrival in Israel, we ended up surrounded by people, complete strangers, who helped us in ways that I couldn't see. This journey for us, there was never a way to see what was coming. We only knew what was behind us, and that was the threats on our lives. It's hard to explain, but it was like, I call it the pull. It was like a pull was taking us wherever we needed to go. And all I did instinctively was follow the pull, which took us to the wall, which ended up, we found people found us. They helped us find an apartment. They donated furniture. They gave us food. They helped me with the Aliyah process, helped the children to get registered for school. They invited us into their homes for Shabbat dinners, for holidays. They took us camping. We began a life in Israel surrounded by caring and loving people who supported us every step of the way. Eventually, the letter came in the mail that my ex-husband had filed a Hague Convention case against me for taking the kids out of the country. In addition, there were 6 felony counts, 3 for child abduction and 3 for kidnapping. The families that had become our family in Israel, they jumped into action. They hired a lawyer, and all of the court documents in that suitcase I brought with us were translated into Hebrew and submitted to the court. We had our first hearing in Tikva. I was a nervous wreck because I knew my ex-husband would be there. People came with us. They helped to translate what was happening during that court hearing. He was there, and it was extremely frightening. There were people there to protect us. We were all interviewed very thoroughly by the court's judge.
Going to come in, she's gonna water the glasses, the picture, so we're ready for her to do that. So, I think you want me to do it? Sure, if you want.
I'm not sure what I'm hearing.
Can you please mute yourself? Thank you.
Oh, okay. The children and I were interviewed by therapists, social workers. The children's teachers were interviewed, and the people that had become part of our lives were also interviewed. The
So
judge ruled.
the ones that are left are the water.
Excuse me, can everybody?
It's the smaller one or the large?
Sorry,
one
I'm
is
trying to
the
mute.
water
I don't know how to do it.
What?
Sorry, who's asking?
box. That's all there are, those, it's the larger one that's.
Susan, mute everybody except for Lari.
Liami, I have done, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, Laura.
We won the first hearing, and he appealed, and we had to go to Lod for the second hearing. We won that one, and then he appealed again to the Israeli Supreme Court, and we won that as well. It was an amazing experience. It was very harrowing because he had to keep returning to Israel. We did know that we were being protected, however, but it was still scary knowing that he was in the country. But Israel did protect us up through the Supreme Court, and it was deemed to be a danger if the children were returned to the U.S. The following 9 years were filled with ups and downs. In the beginning, my children struggled learning Hebrew and having to attend school 6 days a week. They were used to the 5-day school week in America. But eventually, it just didn't seem to matter. They transformed themselves through their experience and through the people around us. We had to rely on people for food each week. The kids grew out of their clothes, and people brought bags of clothing to us. We ended up with an apartment filled with furniture and everything we could possibly need. And I remember so many times when the kids were at school, and I would sit at home and I would just cry and wonder, what am I supposed to do now? How do I manage this life in this country? I had tried to go to Ulpan when the hearing started, and I was so stressed and trying to figure out how to take care of my children that I never finished Ulpan. So I'm admitting to all of you that I don't speak Hebrew. My kids do. They're fluent, but I never learned. I became a private English teacher, and I found ways to take care of myself and the children. I also learned how to live in the moment because I was struggling with every aspect of being a new immigrant in this country. My health was poor at the time. My mental health was even worse because of what I had done. And even though we had been successful with the court hearing, the next chapter now was trying to find a way to make a life in this country. The more I saw my children adapting and their friends coming over, and all I could cook for them was rice or pasta or peanut butter and jelly. That was the extent of the meals, but I saw the laughter in my children. And there was someone in our town that had recommended kosher kravi for my oldest son because my 2 boys had a lot of anger and they were fighting a lot. They also had a lot of anxiety. They would come home from school crying some days, thinking that their father was chasing them or following them. And I had to reassure them that they were safe. And that took time. Kosher kravi for my boys was a saving grace. And the people that donated the monthly tuition for both my sons to go was a miracle beyond belief. And they would come home dirty, sweaty. Their arms were bleeding from crawling on the rocks, but they were laughing. And they were getting their frustration and their anger out. And they were learning to heal and learning that they were not to blame for the abuse, that it wasn't their fault, but that's what they were being told in the US. My determination to help us all heal was first and foremost. And I think learning how to live in the moment had a lot to do with that. I used to say to myself, Lari, where are your feet? They're on the floor. In this moment, I'm okay. We have a roof over our head. We have food. The kids are okay. They were struggling in school. They were struggling with the Hebrew, but they were receiving resources and there was support on a regular basis. I wasn't able to leave Israel because of the criminal charges pending. So I had resolved myself that I would be there for the rest of my life and that we would all be there and we were never going to leave. As my oldest son, Adam, got closer to 18, he made the decision that he wasn't going to, they weren't able to become citizens because they would have had to have both parents' signature. So they were residents the entire time we were there. But I had dual citizenship. Adam wanted to come back to the US and join the military in the US and get his education paid for. I had to respect that decision because most of his life and his childhood was being directed by other people in a very unfair and unhealthy way. So I respected that decision. I said, okay, Adam, even though I was scared and I was worried, and we knew that their father was still living in California. So I sent Adam to my cousins in Idaho. He joined the Guard, and then he received a recommendation from his commander. So he's currently in his 3rd year at West Point, and I am very proud of him. He is doing well, and he has healed, and he's now 25. And my second son, Zach, he went back to the US. He started in Idaho, and he joined the Guard, and he just returned from a deployment in Kuwait. He also had a mission in Israel while he was in Kuwait, because he was the only one that could speak Hebrew fluently. And so he went with his unit and he came to Israel for a week, and he did whatever it is he did. And I got to see him. Their father passed away a few years ago, and the boys had come back to Israel. We happened to all be together. And that's when I first met Susan and Kipo Lim. We went through a lot of emotion together. And it was a very trying time. I think at some point they thought they would find closure with their father, or he would apologize, or he would somehow be able to find a relationship with them, but that never happened. I reached out to Kipo Lim. I was very much in despair. Susan helped me through some very, very dark times. And after the boys returned to the US and we realized that we were safe overall, that they could travel freely around America. And I think part of the reason they joined the military in the US was to protect themselves from their father. They've admitted it in certain ways, but they're young men, and they have their ways of communicating. They don't say everything, but I can tell as their mother. Amy and I were still in Israel up until this last year. And I was determined, once I realized he had passed away and Amy was 18, I wanted to return to the US and go to trial. In fact, Susan and I talked about that often. I was going to go to trial because I believed I had a Supreme Court ruling from Israel, and their father had passed away, and we had all this documentation. But my children did an intervention with me, and they called me on FaceTime and said, Mom, we don't want any more trauma, accept a plea deal. And there was an attorney that was helping me, and he negotiated for me to accept 3 counts of misdemeanor child abduction, and the kidnapping charges would be dismissed. And I was stubborn. I didn't want to do it because I believed we had done the right thing. But they said, my children said, but they'll put you in jail and you'll sit there and you'll have to await trial. And in the end, they were right. So I made that decision to accept the plea. I was supposed to be given a monetary amount of restitution that I was supposed to pay the US for what I had done, but that amount never came. So, and I had checked Interpol, and the red notice that was out for me was gone. So I took a leap of faith, and Amy and I, we hadn't left Israel in 9 years, and we took a trip to Greece because it was inexpensive. And I was arrested in Greece. And I was on house arrest there for 6 weeks. And that's when Kipo Lim really stepped up in an amazing way. I was supposed to be extradited back to the United States. But again, another miracle. Between Greece and Israel and the Kipo Lim organization that helped to keep me sane during that time, got me back to Israel before the US extradited me, because Greece saw the same paperwork that Israel saw. And I'm not really sure how it happened, but it happened. I went back to Israel. Susan and the organization helped me prepare to go back to the US and face the charges, which I did in December, a year ago this month. I was arrested at LAX, put into handcuffs, and taken to the courthouse, where it was filled with friends and family that I hadn't seen in a long time. And I accepted the charges and thought that would be my freedom. Came back to Israel. Amy and I found a $22 flight to Italy in March. And we went to Italy, and I was arrested again, and Amy was with me. The charges had already been resolved. The red notice, unfortunately, hadn't been recalled. I reached out to Susan, as my daughter Amy did. She was with me. We were both put into a holding cell at the airport in Italy. I was then transported to a women's prison on an island in Italy. My frustration level at that point was beyond. I was angry. I was fuming. I was in this Italian prison. I couldn't speak the language. I was humiliated. And at that point, there weren't even any charges pending against me, but the US had made a mistake and hadn't recalled the red notice. The Israeli embassy, the United States Embassy, Greece, Kipolim, all of these wonderful people got involved and got the correct document sent to the embassy in Italy. And I was finally released after 3 days. Came back to Israel with my daughter, Amy, and she wanted to go to school in the US as well. And I wanted to come back and see family and friends here. So we did. We sold our things and we donated a lot of things. And I've been back here since summertime. It's been very hard to be back here for a lot of reasons. There still are things here that I have to deal with, consequences based on my actions. But my heart is in Israel, and it always will be. And I'm hoping to come back very soon. Talking about resiliency and moving through hard times, it truly, from my experience, I can only speak my truth. When you're on the right path, my experience has been that the right people come into your life and come into your world. I can't even imagine the amount of miracles that our family experienced in Israel. It's unbelievable. If someone else was telling me this story, I think I'd be wondering, how could all this happen? But it did, and I'm here as a testament to the beauty of Israel and the people. The Kipolim organization has been absolutely amazing. My goal now at 61 is to share our story and find ways to help others, and look ahead to the future of how do you move through difficult times? How do you find yourself when you're in a harrowing situation? And we've been in many harrowing situations, but I'm here to tell you my kids are okay. I'm okay. I miss Israel very, very much. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with all of you today. And thank you, Susan, for everything. And Liami, the day I met Liami in Tel Aviv, and he tried to help me get to the airport because they didn't keep my passport. And he was there and he took me for soup, and I was out of my mind. It was, and he was so calm. Liami, you're amazing. And Zvika, I don't know if he's on.
Unfortunately not.
He's not here because he's in Gaza.
I'm hoping he will make it, but he hasn't been able to at the moment.
The amount of advice.
Svika, I have a message from Svika, who is in the middle of a operation now. So he wrote, "Sadly, I can't come at operation now. Please say I bless them all and appreciate all the holy work they are doing and heart." So that's why he couldn't be here to tell you that.
I can't believe that you've managed to squeeze 2.5 years conversations into 25 minutes. And it's just incredible. I mean, seriously incredible. Somebody's just posted a question. You are an inspiration to all. Do you do speaking engagements to educate others? And somebody else has posted amazing resilience, Kol Hakavod.
Thank you. Yes, that's what I'm in the process of doing. I have to say, you know, as we all know, life is a few steps forward, many steps back, and then maybe a step forward. I have speaking engagements. I had one in Israel before I left, and I'm working on more because that is my mission now. I have to say, I'll share one more thing with you because it just happened this week. I've been a teacher for over 35 years. I've taught elementary up through university. I've been a master teacher in a school district, licensing and training new teachers. In Israel, I had the honor of teaching privately and in schools. Because of the charges, because of the plea deal, I pled no contest a year ago, December. The district attorney sent those charges to the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. And this week I had a hearing in Sacramento where going through the process, they're going to make a decision whether or not to revoke my teaching credential and deem me unfit as an educator. On one hand, you know, in my mind, when I come across challenges, I try to balance it out with the emotional response and then the reality. I protected my children. My whole life has been dedicated to children. In Israel, I think the hardest part for me to leave, and I do have Zooms still going on with many of my students, the students and their families, they became my family. And I protect children with a ferocity, not only as a woman, as a mother, but as someone that knows, I think, what's best for kids. So I'm sitting in the state of California right now, awaiting a decision whether or not my teaching credential will be revoked. I've come to terms with the fact that whether or not they choose to take it from me, not relevant, because I'm going to keep my head high. I'm going to continue to move forward and do those speaking engagements and share our story. And it's brutal. I'll be honest. This week was brutal. And then Susan invited me to do this, and it like breathes life into me. Every time I have this flag up, and I have one for all my kids, they have it in their rooms. There's something about the state of Israel and all of you that breathes life into me. And I'll be forever grateful, regardless of their decision. But I know I just answered a really long answer with the question, but yes, speaking engagements, absolutely.
Thank you so much. Honestly, it's so good to talk to you and see you again. I can't begin to tell you. Thank you so much. I'd like to now introduce Rachel. Rachel is the wife of David. This amazing American-Israeli couple survived being shot and he survived being shot and killed the terrorists, preventing a huge tragedy. David can't be with us this evening because he's actually in the army at the moment. I believe he's down south, but Rachel, his wife, is going to talk to us. So Rachel, thank you. Welcome to Tikva.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
I'll just make a small correction. So the terrorist is still alive.
Oh.
My husband did manage to injure the terrorist, and he's in prison now. So just a small correction.
The army, you got it wrong.
He wishes. Yeah, so it's fine. Yeah, I was really hoping that my husband would be here tonight. This was the plan, that we would say the story together. But suddenly last week he was called, and he's currently in Gaza. So I'm here. So I'll start. About 9 months ago, on March 19th, we left our we had 3 kids at home, and we have one who learns in Modi'in at a dorm school. So we left our 3 kids, and we planned on going to Jerusalem. We started going to a Torah class once a month, just the 2 of us. And we got in our car. It was 3:30. I had my husband pick up our youngest, our 3-year-old, a little bit early because I had an errand that I had to do. And we got in our car, and just like any other day, we started driving. We were driving through, in order to get to anywhere, but back then you had to drive through Hawara. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the village of Hawara. It's been in the news a lot. 3 weeks before that day, two brothers from Har Bracha were murdered in Hawara. Arab terrorists shot them at point blank range and killed them. It was a very heated time in Hawara, but nonetheless, we drove. My husband was driving my car and a small Suzuki. Anyways, we were driving. We slowed down at a traffic circle, and there was a pedestrian on the left side who wanted to cross the road. And as he was coming in front of our car, he faced my husband, who was the driver, and there was something very suspicious about him. We both noticed that he had a certain gaze that seemed very off to us. And then one of his arms was kind of like sticking out. His elbow was sticking out from his jacket. And I said to Dave, Dave, why is he hiding his hand like that? As I said those words, the terrorist pulled out a semi-automatic rifle. Turned out it was a Carlo submachine gun. He turned it and pointed it straight at us. Now, he was literally he was standing in front of our car, point blank range. You could not get any closer to our car. He pulled out the gun, and at the exact same time, there were so many things that happened at the same time. First of all, we were both flooded with adrenaline the moment that we saw that gun. I turned to the right and I pressed myself as much as I could, really in between the seat and the window. I didn't even have time to take off my seatbelt. My husband, I just covered my ears and I closed my eyes and I thought to myself, we're going to die in this car. We're never going home. And at that same moment, I thought immediately, I saw my home and I saw my children, and it seemed like I was getting pulled away from it. Like my house that was just a 10-minute drive away seemed like it was in another world. And I was certain that we're never going home. And I just felt an overwhelming sadness for my children. I thought about all the emotions that they would feel to be alone with no parents, not just one parent gone, both. But at the same time, as I'm thinking all of this, with the adrenaline, everything slows down. I felt the 10 seconds were it felt like a half hour almost, the way it slowed down. My husband simultaneously, as the terrorist pulled out his weapon, my husband, who is extremely trained, he's a Marine sniper, and has excellent shooting skills. He pulled out his weapon and he started firing at the terrorists at the exact same time. The terrorist shot 18 rounds into our car and shot my husband 4 times. My husband shot the terrorist 3 times. While this was all going on, I didn't know what was happening. I had no idea. I thought we were going to die. Now, suddenly I heard a deafening silence. There was dust in the air from all the gunpowder, and there were glass shards all over. There were the shell casings from my husband's gun had fallen all over me, all over my seat. And I still had my eyes closed. And I thought to myself, am I dead? Am I dreaming? What's happening? I opened my eyes, and because it was silent, and I looked down and I started examining my body a little bit, and I saw that I wasn't bleeding. And I thought there's a high likelihood that I was shot, and I just don't feel it because of the adrenaline. I knew that that's a thing. And then I spoke to my husband and I said, is it over? And he said, yeah, it's over. I said, how do you know? And I wasn't looking at Dave yet. I didn't see what he looked like. And he said, I saw him pass my window. I saw a shadow of him. He ran away. The terrorist ran away. And then I thought to myself, Dave and I are having a conversation. He's definitely I can't believe we both survived this. This is crazy. He must be fine, just like I am. That's unbelievable. And I turned to the left. I look at Dave, and what I saw was literally my worst nightmare. Nothing could have prepared me for that. Dave was sitting back, and his whole right arm was covered in blood, and he had like a stream of blood shooting out of his forehead. It was literally hitting the rearview mirror at like high pressure. He was shot in the head. He was shot in the shoulder, and it went to his chest. And he was shot in his arm up here because he was holding onto the steering wheel. And he was very badly injured. And he was just so calm that it was scaring me. And I said to him, I said, Dave, you've been shot badly. Like, do you know that you've been shot? I thought maybe he didn't realize. And I said, Dave, you've been shot in the head. Do you understand this? Are you going to die? He said, no, Rachel, I'm not going to die. I said, but you look like you're dying. How do you know that? He said, Rachel, I have thoughts. I'm still thinking. And he was still very calm and very, very pale. And then it was just like, suddenly he just jolted into action and he started driving. I said, Dave, where are you going? He goes, we're getting out of here. I said, what? I thought at any moment he's going to lose consciousness. He pulls over about 200 meters. And I'm telling him, let's go further. There's army in another, drive another 2 minutes. There's a huge army base. Let's just go there for help. He said no. And it was also pouring rain that day, no visibility. The windshield wipers were just swiping back and forth. And then he pulls over, and what does he do? He pulls out a tourniquet. He had a tourniquet on him all this time. He pulls it out of the pants pocket, like on his lower leg, and he just throws it with one hand because his right arm is totally like, you can't move it. He was so injured. And he puts it as high as he could, and with his teeth, he like pulls on it. And then he takes out a bandage that he had in his pocket because he's ready for anything at all times. And he says to me, open it up. So I start opening the bandage, and I put it on his head where it was bleeding in the front. And he kept pulling it to the back. I thought that he got shot right here. And it turns out that he really got shot like right here. But this was like shrapnel, what I was seeing. And we kept kind of pulling the bandage in different directions, something we spoke about afterwards. We just didn't realize what was going on. Anyways, he then tells me, call the Moked. The Moked is the emergency dispatch number and for our local municipality. And it alerts the army, the police, ambulances, really everybody shows up when it's something like this. And I called the dispatcher, and this scream just came out of me. Like I wasn't expecting to scream. All this time I wasn't screaming even, I was in shock. And I just started yelling in Hebrew saying, my husband is shot. He was shot in the head. We need help. And they're saying, where are you? What are your names? Are your children in the car? And it's very hard to answer all these questions. And they kept saying, okay, we're sending forces. During this time, there were many, it's an Arab village, Hawara, and a lot of the Arab residents were surrounding our car, and nobody came to help. They were whistling. They were taking out their phones and they were filming us. And there was just this feeling like we're stuck here. Dave could die at any moment and nobody is coming to help us. This is like our whole world is in this car right now. And it was just a really difficult feeling. And we were just, it felt like an eternity, these 8 minutes, everyone, we all heard these stories about what happened on October 7th, and people waited in their mamads for 12 hours, 16 hours. I can't even fathom what they went through, because those 8 minutes really felt like forever. It was just awful. And eventually, the dispatcher said, okay, they're close, but they can't find your car. And we're saying, what? We're here. We were trying to explain it to them, and they just couldn't find our car. And then she says to me, open up your window, open up Dave's window and wave. And I was so scared to open my windows because we were being surrounded. I didn't want to get lynched, but I did it anyways. I opened up the window and I leaned over onto Dave, and he started saying, Rachel, my arm. And I rolled down the window and I put my hand out and I just waved and waved. And then I heard the most beautiful sound that I've ever heard in my life. And that was the ambulance siren that just brought it was just like, help is on the way. They're coming to save us. And it was just an unbelievable feeling to suddenly go from being completely alone in the pit of despair, to being embraced. And the first person that showed up to the scene was Dave's cousin, who lives in Itamar as well, and he's a security guy. He didn't even know, when he got the call, he had no idea that it was us. The look on his face was just pure shock. And the head of security from Itamar came, and ambulances, army, police, Hawara was shut down. There were just sirens everywhere, and the terrorists had run away, so we were hearing gunshots still, flash grenades. It was really a whole scene, and it was still very terrifying what was happening there. My husband, the more he realized that people were coming to help, the more the pain started to set in, and he was moaning and groaning, and he went from feeling nothing in the beginning to feeling like it was just unbearable. It was very hard for me to see him like this. As soon as the medic came, I just said, take him, get him out of here, get him out of here. And he left. They took him to the ambulance, and they put me in another ambulance separately. The whole way to the hospital, I was incredibly nervous, and I had just gone from thinking I would die to adjusting to the fact that I'm going to live, but my husband could very well die. And I just started thinking, am I going to go to a funeral tonight? How will I manage with the kids? We have a farm. I felt like all the responsibility and the weight of what had just happened on my shoulders. And I decided in those moments, whatever happens, I'm going to accept it. I have no choice, and I have to push forward. The ride to the hospital was very difficult. I kept asking the people that were with me, is he alive? Is he alive? Is he alive? And nobody knew. And it was just torturous. It took a while to get to the hospital. When I got there, he was in the trauma room, but I didn't see him. And I kept asking, is he alive? Is he alive? Is he alive? Nobody had real answers. And then the director of the hospital, his name is Aaron Rotman, a very, very special person. He came up to me, and he was so calm. And he said to me, Rachel, your husband is alive. I said, are you sure he's alive? He's fine. He goes, and his vitals look good. His vitals look good. He didn't go into the CT yet, but his vitals look good. And I said to him, can you say that again? He said, your husband's alive. I said to him, okay, just say it one more time. He said to me, he's alive. I said, do you think he'll be okay? He said, I can't tell you for sure. We need to wait for the CT results. A few minutes later, they wheeled Dave in, who was intubated and sedated and had tubes all over him and blood all over. This was the first time I was seeing him with, the injuries. And he went in for the CT scan, which took 40 minutes. During that time, we were in Beilinson Hospital. During that time, I just sat on the floor outside of the CT room, and people from our life just appeared. Dave's uncle and cousins, and the rabbi of our yeshuv came and sat down next to me on the floor to comfort me. So many neighbors, so many friends. There must have been about 40 people right outside that CT room with me that were just there. They heard and they came. To think we were just two people, and suddenly we were just being enveloped with so much love and support and familiar faces, which was really unbelievable. After about 40 minutes, so the doctor came out and pulled me in and said to me, he said, look, everything looks fine. I said, what are you talking about? He said, look, he was shot. He has a broken bone. He has broken bones in his arm. He's going to need surgery. He was shot in the shoulder, but it didn't affect any vital organs. The bullet is actually today, it's still lodged in his chest. It went through his arm into his chest. He said, and I said, okay, but what about the head wound? Come on. And he said, listen, it went underneath his scalp and it exited he had about this many stitches in the end, like just a huge amount of stitches, but it totally did not penetrate his skull at all. And then I asked, okay, does he have internal bleeding from the impact? He said, Rachel, he doesn't have internal bleeding. He doesn't have all of his vital organs are fine. he doesn't have any blood vessel damage. And I couldn't believe what he was saying. And in those moments, I couldn't believe how it turned around. That such a nightmare, how could it have turned into something like such a miracle? I couldn't process the many miracles in one shot. It was really an unbelievable feeling, but I felt such a sense of relief at that from that moment on, even though he was still asleep, and he hadn't been woken up yet, and he had a road to recovery. He really was badly injured. I felt like, okay, if he survived that in that way, I don't have to worry right now. He's going to be okay. It was just unbelievable. Hours later, they woke him up, and I went to go see him in the intensive care room, and I just said to him, Dave, you saved our lives. You saved our lives. You shot the terrorist. You saved my life. I owe you my life. And he was still kind of out of it. Later in the night, as I tried to go to sleep, I hadn't cried during the whole ordeal because I had so much adrenaline. I think it was one of the effects of adrenaline that my body just wasn't producing tears. And I'm not someone that doesn't cry, but there were just no tears. And then the moment I closed my eyes, the tears just came pouring out of my eyes, like just uncontrollably. And I just sobbed these tears of relief, these tears of gratitude. I've never experienced anything like it. We stayed in the hospital for a couple days. During that time, nothing could have prepared me for the overwhelming support from really so much of the nation of Israel, really. I'd never in my life thought first of all, we live very private lives. I never thought that I would meet so many people, that so many people would even know who we are, that would know about our story. It turns out people were extremely, extremely inspired by what he did, and they felt such a sense of pride, like as if it happened to them. And I think that's a really beautiful thing about Am Yisrael, that we really are connected. We're connected during hard times. We all cry together, and we're connected during joyful times, times of gratitude. And it's really a beautiful thing. We felt so much love. My heart was really filled with an amount of love that I don't think I'll ever experience again. I think it's a very rare thing. And thank God, we went home after 4 days. And, for me to go back to my children, that was the happiest day of my life. I really thought in those moments in my car that I would never see them again. And to go back and to hug my children, it was just very emotional. And, my role as a mother for me is my life's purpose. And my home and being a mother, it's not a coincidence that I thought of those two things first and foremost. Nothing else in those moments was important. Nothing, not money, not anything else. So, it wasn't simple at the same time. I went through a large trauma. Of course, you're all therapists. I'm sure you're all thinking about the trauma. It was very traumatic. I experienced physical symptoms like nightmares, uncontrollable nightmares. It was every night, and then it was every week, and then every 2 weeks, every 2 months, and now about every, now it's less, but every now and then. But my husband has recovered. He is currently in Gaza. And I'm just extremely thankful to Hashem. I don't know why we, received the miracle we received, but I know that it's important to publicize a miracle. I believe in that. And I really felt that day that we were being watched, and, a moment that was so terrifying and so dark and so difficult. When I look back on it today, it's actually the most beautiful moment of my life, because I realized that in that difficult, painful moment, I was actually in the eye of the storm. And I wasn't aware of it when it was happening, but I was being protected without my knowledge, and my husband as well. So I'm indebted to my husband for the rest of my life, you know, and just grateful overall.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I'm speechless, to be honest with you. I'm just like very overwhelmed by your story and the miracle that turned out to be. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Rachel? Anything you'd like to ask? No? I think everybody's just in awe of what you've just told us, to be truthful with you, and just feeling it really here. Thank you so much. And the miracle is that he's well, thank God, Baruch Hashem, and now fighting to save this beautiful country. Thank you. The next speaker that we have this evening is Rabbi Leo D. I'm going to unmute you. Thank you. I'd like to welcome you, Rabbi D. Rabbi D also lost his wife Lucy, his daughter Maya and Rena Pesach of last year in a terrible terrorist attack. Rabbi D became quite famous overnight for the wrong reasons. He's now an inspirational speaker, and we have the honor of him here tonight to join us. Rabbi D, thank you very much for taking time to speak to us this evening, and we'd love to hear your words. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Liami, and to Leah and to Rachel, who actually I caught most Rachel's talk, and wow, yeah. So I'm humbled by all of you, and thank you to all of you for all the amazing work that you do for our soldiers and for the Olim. My story, I'll tell it as, you know, as much as I can tell, but without crying. We were driving up to the north of Israel, 2 cars. Waze sent us on a strange route on a side road. I changed it to go up the 90, and my wife didn't. And half an hour later, I get a call saying there's been a terror attack. Are you okay? So I said, we're okay. I want to check with Lucy and Maya and Rena. We checked on Family Link to see where they were, and they were at the Hamra Junction where the terror attack had taken place. So we were immediately up, you know, in shock. And then I turned around, drove back to Hamra. My son had, I think, Telegram, and he already had seen a picture someone had posted of the car, which was our car, and our swim bag with blood on it and bullets in the car. We get there about, I suppose, 45 minutes later. They tell us that Lucy's been airlifted to the hospital, but I still can't believe it's them. So we're waiting. They won't let us see anything. Eventually, they bring me the ID card of Maya, and then I know that that's the worst that has happened. And I drive down at full speed to Hadassah and Kerem, and then Lucy has an operation to remove 2 bullets from her brainstem and her spine. And then it's Friday already, so we decided to have the Levaya on Sunday for the girls. Just, you know, horrific. That Friday night, I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was, you know, visualizing what happened to them, and I just kept waking up every minute. And when I woke up, my reality was worse than my nightmare. So I tried to go back to sleep again, and I was like this pattern. So the next night, Motzei Shabbat, I tried a different strategy, which is I decided to focus on Karen, Tali, and Yehuda, my surviving kids, and I thought about them, and that really worked. And I was able to sleep, and I got a good night's sleep. And I realized I'd studied quite a bit of Emunah, and particularly the Emunah Shirim of Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg. And one of the things that he said in one of his Shirim very recently was it was his 10 year, he'd done 10 years of these shiurim, so it was about 500 and whatever, 510th shir. And he said, I don't know why I keep doing this. He said, the message is always the same. So that every time I say exactly the same thing. If you think about what is good in your life and not what's bad, so then you'll be happy. That is the whole message of Emunah. Think about, appreciate what you have and not what you don't have. And strangely enough, it works. I mean, it worked for me. And it got me through, that at least those few days. And then we got to the Shloshim. Well, as I said, the Shiva. I mean, I think I identify with Rachel that we were blessed that the whole of Am Yisrael seemed to pass through our house and contact us, and then embrace us. So, and that was tremendously powerful as well, the Shiva. And people asked me afterwards, was it better the people that you knew or the people you didn't know? And very strangely, I said, I think it was the people I didn't know. There's some people I didn't know, particularly other people who'd been through this type of trauma, who came and just said one or two things, just give me one idea here or there. And I remember those interactions more than probably anything else. And also just having lots of people around was amazing. And then, I mean, my community is fantastic in Efrat, because everybody arranged the Shiva. We had people literally serving food and drink, and we had people arranging chairs, and we had people doing everything for us. I don't even know what had to be done, but we had a tent in our garden. Somebody put it up, somebody took it down. Everything just arrived. I didn't have to do anything, and it was just incredible. So it was also that feeling of being looked after, which was very heartwarming. And then after the Shloshim, I said to my kids, and my son told me today that he told me this, maybe it came from him, but anyway, I said to him, look, we're in a new world. I said, we were in world number 1, we had 2 parents and 5 kids. We're now in world number 2 with 1 parent and 3 kids. We had 30 days of pain, suffering, and tears, and we have to make the best of it, and we have to be happy, and that's what it's going to be. And Baruch Hashem, we took that approach. I'm just thinking about the things which are relevant to you as counselors. We had varying different advice on different aspects of what would happen. One of the things that people talked about was sitting down for a Shabbos meal, the first Shabbos meal. And Tali had a friend from one family. She went on some of the trips with one family, and the girls said it took them 8 years before they were able to sit around the table, just them, without their mother or whoever it was who'd been killed. And that was that. And somebody else took me aside and said it took them a year before they could sit around the table without their son who'd been killed. And I looked at the kids and I said, well, actually, somebody else said to me that their father, who was a Holocaust survivor, took them around the table when they were kids, and their sister died at a young age. And he said, this is a house for living in. We're going to live in this house. And I think when he said that to me, it spoke to me most. And I said to my kids, look, we're going to have to bite the bullet. So we spent a number of Shabbats with my parents. Then we spent a number of Shabbats. We would invite people to us. So we'd go to people locally. And we didn't sit around our table. And then after about 3 months, it was a Friday night, and we just said, fine. And we sat around the table, and it was really lovely. And since then, every Friday night, we just have the 4 of us. And we've been away together. We just went to Eilat. And, I enjoy the time with them. I think they enjoyed the time with us. One of my daughters said to me, I said to her at the end of the holiday, the previous holiday, I said, how do you enjoy the family holiday? She said it was a holiday, but it wasn't a family holiday. So it's a healing process that, who knows if it will ever heal, but that's where we're at. There's another aspect to it, though, and I think this is very important. I don't know if you deal with trauma so much, but I have something to say about trauma therapy from my own experience. I went to I think 3 psychologists, only for a few weeks, and I stopped after about 10 weeks probably, and that was that. And now I've stopped. Actually, one of the things that I do is I continue to go to an acupuncturist, and the acupuncturist is fantastic because I was taking sleeping pills and Valium, I think, and I wanted to get off them very quickly. And within a couple of treatments, he basically, I don't know what he did, basically treated me, and it was phenomenal. So I continued going to him. He treated me for many different things. One of the things he treated me for was sadness, or whatever, just sort of trauma, I suppose. And he said to me, I want to put a needle in your wrist. Is that okay? And he noticed already that when he took my pulse, I really sort of, I'm very squeamish, only when it comes to putting something in my wrist or touching my wrist. So he said, look, okay, I'll do it somewhere else. Whenever I go to a couple other places where and it worked, it was fine, it was very helpful. Rosh Hashanah came about. Rosh Hashanah, I wanted to go to dip in, I don't like the mikveh, so I went to our local swimming pool. And I said, I'll dip in the swimming pool, which is, for a man, is just as good on Erev Rosh Hashanah. As I walked in, I felt a sharp pain on my inside of my wrist, just in the middle of my wrist, just here. And I was bitten by some sort of fly, which there's like sandflies in this place. Anyway, when I dipped in, whatever, I didn't really think about it. That day was very sad. Unfortunately, the happiest days turned into the saddest days. I just had my birthday on Friday. Tough, it's difficult. But I woke up on the Shabbos morning, Rosh Hashanah morning, and I was itching like anything down here, just here. And I felt happy. And then I kept itching all day, and actually for about 3 or 4 days, this itching lasted. And I went back to my acupuncturist. I said to him, is it possible that that point, where exactly where I was bitten was exactly the acupuncture point? Is it possible all the scratching is helping? He said, absolutely. He said that's exactly one of the treatments. In fact, he showed me research that they actually use bee stings as long-term acupuncture treatment. So there's been quite a bit. Anyway, so Hashem gave me a bee sting exactly the right place I needed to cheer me up over Rosh Hashanah. That's something which helped me a lot. And something else that is very important, which I'd like to share with you, which is that I think there are 2 major ways to deal with tragedy, and we see them in our culture, in our Masoret, in our tradition. So the one is to cry and to be sad and to be reflective and to think, why did it happen and how did it happen, and it's quite so intellectual. That's what I found personally. That's what I found in my psychology appointments. I found them very, very painful, but that seemed to be what they were trying to do. And I call that the Job method of dealing with trauma, because you look at the story of Job, he gets attacked by a load of different tragedies in the first chapter. There are then 40 chapters of him sitting in his house, being visited by friends, discussing, was he good, was he bad, did he deserve it, did he not deserve it, does God care, does God not care? And after 40 chapters of getting absolutely nowhere and coming to no conclusion, we only finish the book because God comes along and gives him a load of reasons to celebrate, so he can get up and leave the room, and now we're free. And it struck me that the rabbis say that the story probably never happened, and if it happened, Job was definitely not Jewish. And I think that this is not a Jewish response to tragedy. I'm not saying that psychology isn't. I just think that too much introspection and too much going over it and thinking about why it happened and so forth is really not a Jewish way to deal with it. And then people say to me when I say that, well, what about the shiva? The shiva is exactly that. You sit in your lounge, people come along and you discuss why and what and whatever. And I said, yeah, but the secret about shiva is that shiva, it's 7. Right? The point is that you actually have to get up on the 7th day, in fact, in the morning of the 7th day, and leave. And that actually is the purpose of the Shiva, is that you get it out of your system so you can get up and leave and move on. So I think that certainly it's a part of the process, but it's not the whole process. And that's what the rabbis are trying to teach us. So what is the process then? So I look into the Jewish tradition. And there seems to be one person who deals with tragedy better than anyone else in history, and that's Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, who lost 24,000 students in 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuot, probably to the Roman during the Bar Kokhba rebellion, and his students were all soldiers, and he literally loses all his students, all his friends, everything he's worked for 24 years, and suddenly has nothing, and he has every reason to disappear into oblivion, into depression, and yet he handpicks 5 new students who become the students of the Mishnah and basically transform, Jewish learning forever. So we see this is like an incredible thing. How did Rabbi Akiva know that the way to respond to tragedy was to pick himself up and start again and to be extremely active? And there's a story that I heard from Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson. He told, and I listened now to Shirim in the car, which I never did in the past, but for some reason my car app brings up loads of different podcasts and introduced me to many different rabbis I never come across in my life. He tells a story that apparently Lubavitcher Rebbe's accountant, his finance man, had a heart attack. He was probably about 80 years old. And he was in hospital, had an operation. He was recovering. About a week later, and his son is at his bedside. His son gets a message from the secretary of the Lubavitcher Rebbe saying, Lubavitcher Rebbe has discovered a line in the accounts which he doesn't think is correct. Could your father please check it out? So he's thinking to himself, the son, who's probably, I imagine, 50 years old this time, he said, why is he troubling my father? He's just had an operation. He's been recovering for a week. Like, the last thing he wants to do is to work. He needs to just rest. He needs to just lie there. What is he? I should tell him. And he, for some reason, he didn't tell him that this. He just sort of, he said, okay. So he went to his father. His father was sitting up in bed looking quite bored. And he said to him, look, the Lubavitcher Rebbe's picked out this particular line in the accounts, whatever, and he wants you to have a look at it. Are you feeling okay? He said the moment he said that, his father's face lit up, because he'd been lying there with nothing to do for a week, and suddenly he was sort of activated. And he realized that actually the Rebbe had actually done this on purpose, because he'd realized that this particular fellow was going to be sort of lying there and suffering without anything to do. So he created a reason for him to be busy. And I think this is something which Rabbi Akiva certainly taught me, which is that to be busy doing something meaningful is the best, I have to say, it's the best treatment for trauma. And people said to me, routine. I can tell you that if I'd gone back to my previous routine, I would be in pieces, because my previous routine involved very much working from home on occasions, and working out of the house, making dinner for Lucy, her making dinner for me, whatever, taking turns. We had a very sort of fixed routine. Had I gone back into that routine without her there, every single moment would have been a memory of what I was missing. I was blessed because all these people came to the Shiva and lots of people got involved. After the Shiva, people started asking me to do various different things, and they started WhatsApping me and emailing me and saying, will you come to this? Will you do this? Will you speak here? Or will you whatever, get involved in this project or that project? And I don't know why, I decided, I knew I had to quit my job. I was a teacher. It was only the last couple of months before the end of term. They all knew their stuff, and they found somebody to replace me very quickly. And I knew I had to do that. So I had the time free. I said, okay, whatever people ask me to do, I will do if I have the time. So I started putting it into my diary, whatever, and filling my diary up. I met amazing people. I came across fascinating situations which I never thought I would be in. And every project that I do, or anything I get involved in, is actually connected to the character traits of one of the girls. So I'll tell you, Lucy, her name was Light, Lucy, and she used to shine light on people and help them to understand themselves. So that was like something she did for me, and something with everything I do in that context is in her memory. Maya, her name actually meant the water of Hashem, which was Torah, and she was passionate about learning and teaching Torah. So all the teaching and learning of Torah, which I do, is also in her memory. And Rena, strangely enough, although she was at Kiryat Arba, which is quite a sort of right-wing school, was the only girl in her school who actually wanted to promote peace with Arabs, which was, interesting. So anything which I do now, which is vaguely connected to shalom, I don't like the word peace. Shalom can involve killing lots of terrorists and then making shalom. Peace sounds a little bit like a ceasefire. Our concept of shalom is not as peaceful as the word peace might suggest. But so anything which we do in terms of shalom is really in her memory. So when I came across one psychologist, Benny Lehman, I don't maybe you know him from Jerusalem. He's actually a teacher also at Yeshivat Har Etzion, and he gave me a few sessions. He said to me, "You are suffering two separate issues, two separate traumas." So I said, "Okay, what are they?" He said, "On the one hand, he said, the time which you now have because Lucy's not at home when you come home, and the kids are not there on Shabbat, and you can't pick up the phone and speak to them. All that extra time is, something you have to fill with something else. And every time you're going to fill it, you're going to feel the pain of, the fact that where you're filling the time." I said, the second thing is when you just think about them, that is going to create a pain because, you're going to think about all the things you've lost. And I said to him, "Benny, this was already a few weeks after the Shiva." I said, "Baruch Hashem, I'm involved in so many different projects now." And I said, "They're helping me in both those ways." So number one, I come home at night. It's often 11 o'clock before I go to bed. And I don't have time to actually think about what I would be doing with the time that I would have if I had it, because I don't have that time. So that's number one. Number two, when I think about the girls now, I don't always cry, but sometimes I actually feel happy or even proud about the things I'm doing in their memory. And so it's helping me in those two ways, being busy, doing something meaningful. So I guess if I wanted to give you one message as counselors or psychologists, whatever it is, I think that for people who go through trauma, I don't know about people in other situations because I'm going to speak from my own personal perspective. Being busy, doing something meaningful is, I think, the best possible treatment because you're just active. I mean, thank God, strangely enough, it worked out that my son started boarding school. My middle daughter started midrashah, and my oldest daughter was very engaged already in a very full-on job in a Beit Yeled in Gilo. So they're all very busy and doing meaningful things as well. So that's helped them. So what I find is, and maybe this is unhealthy, and I'm sure you psychologists out there will say that I'm just filling up my time. But when I don't, when I have spare time, that's when I find myself sort of feeling self-pity, and I find that very unhelpful. So I try and be as busy as I can, and sometimes that's more successful than others. That's really how I am trying to cope with it. And then things come back to remind you. So today, I mean, people, lovely things, but sometimes the loveliest things are the most painful things. So the kids in the neighborhood have built a beautiful path opposite our house across the mountain. They actually organized heavy equipment to come and to blast a space through it. They're hand building wooden furniture. I mean, what they're doing is absolutely incredible. Anyway, I refused to go there the last 8 months. I refused to go down this path. They've literally just sort of finished the last few bits and pieces. So the guy, the 18-year-old boy, 19-year-old boy who's in charge of the project, and I guess was a friend of Maya's, called me up today and said, "Can I take you around?" So he did, and it was lovely, but I found it very emotional because whatever. So that's how I'm dealing with it. I think I would go back and say, one other last thing, go back full circle. It does help to think about what you have in life. And I think that, as a sort of short term, I think that the long-term treatment for trauma is to be busy doing important things, but that takes a bit more activity and planning. In the short term, when you have these feelings that come back and haunt you, you have to refocus on the good, and there is so much good. Rabbi Ephraim in his Shirim talks about a cup of coffee in the morning, your first cup of coffee in the morning, and so he says, that the coffee bean was grown in Brazil. It was roasted, by in a factory by probably manned by 1,000 people. It was transported by some driver across to the cargo. The cargo was loaded by cargo, another 10,000 people involved in the shipping process. And then it comes to a factory in America or Israel, whatever, it's ground. And the milk comes from a cow, which is from a local field, and it's kibbutz. And if you think about everything that comes together just to make that cup of coffee, right? There's so much to be grateful for, not to mention the fact that you took your first step in the morning, you took your first breath, you were alive when you woke up. You have the house around you, you have the community around you, you have your family. So if you just reframe those moments when you're feeling sad, it is possible. It's definitely possible to do anything. So there's a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy for dealing with trauma. Maybe I need to find a medium-term strategy as well. Anyway, happy to take any questions. I don't know if that's planned. I think we're coming to an
Anybody
end.
have any questions for Rabbi D? Suzanne, you have to unmute yourself, please.
I was just saying, Rabbi D, it's just so inspiring and so beautiful what you're saying as a way to move forward and to be able to incorporate all the tragedy and just find beauty in life in spite of that. It's very, very inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I'd say one more thing. I said to the kids over Shabbat that I came to mind this Shabbat that people always ask you, do you have problems believing in God and whatever, and do you blame God, etc., etc. So I said, look, I think God is a package deal. If you don't believe in God, then when these things happen, it's a complete tragedy. There's, it's just a massive loss. It's inexplicable, but then life is inexplicable anyway, and life is meaningless. So therefore, it's sort of slightly irrelevant. And that's the package of not believing in God. If you do believe in God, then you believe that He's got a plan, and that you'll probably find out what it is at some point in the future, and that they're probably in a much better place now than they were. And you have to take everything together. You can't just take bits. And if you think God is this little object you carry around with you on a charm, and He does exactly what you want, then you probably haven't got the right idea of what God is. So that was my latest little thought.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to say anything? No? I'm amazed. Okay. I would, before we go on to hear some very nice words from President Herzog, who has purposefully made a video to thank all of us for the work that we are doing, I would just like to say thank you to everybody who's here and everybody who is not here, because you're all inspirational. Our three speakers this evening have taught us that out of trauma and tragedy, life can continue. And each one of you is a shining star in that. We're all very humbled by each and everybody's stories. How we all got together in the first place is an absolute miracle, to be honest with you. Born out of a few words that I said to Liami before October the 7th, and then after October the 7th, we came into action to set up Tikva line, which is our 24/7 support line. And that's how I met all of you, those of you who have volunteered for our therapy side, and those of you who have unbelievably manned a helpline for 24/7 since the last 6 weeks. mostly not receiving calls, but the calls have started to come through today, yesterday, Erev Shabbat, and Thursday morning we have been taking calls. And it's been so delightful to hear Scott this afternoon, who, bless him, for the last few weeks has been saying, Susan, there's no calls. What am I going to do? There's no calls. I can't do it anymore. And then Baruch Hashem, he rang me, he'd got a call today. So, you know, I know that Rachel's had a call, Suzanne's had a call, quite a few of us now have had calls. I thank you for staying with us, because I don't believe that we've actually hit the road running yet. I think Israel is still very, very shocked. There's so many people still moving forward without recognizing what's actually before them. We are a country that is in trauma. We have to find our own ways through. And I believe that coming together as a team of volunteers for Tikva, for Kippurim, has given us all hope for a better future through the chesed that all of you, each and every one of you, have shown to Israel and to our organization. I'm not going to single out anybody especially, because each and every one of you is a star, and Liami and I and Stika can't thank you enough for everything that you have done for us. I would like to now share a video with you, after which I will open up for any questions, if anybody has any questions, and then we have Hatikva at the end to conclude tonight's party. It's not a party, but I wanted to do something to get everybody together, and I wanted you all to feel inspired. And I think, hopefully, well, from me, I feel totally inspired by everybody's stories this evening. So here I'm going to share, please God, I'm going to share with you President Herzog's few words that he's got for us. Excuse my technical skills. I'm just going to hit that big arrow.
Shalom, dear friends, from the President's residence in Jerusalem. It is a dark and difficult hour for Israel. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis have been displaced from their homes. Men, women, and children are still living in the darkness of captivity. Thousands have lost family members. So many of our young people are on the front lines of battle. Uncertainty and vulnerability are everywhere. So many are suffering. I don't need to tell you that for Olim, the new immigrants, the difficulty of these circumstances is almost insurmountable. For these brave spirits who have heard the call of their heart, Lech Lecha, and have often left families, left homes, left businesses, and all their networks of friends and employment and security and what's not, these times can feel especially trying. I'm reminded here of what has been so clear throughout this year, that we are a people that has known unbearable suffering, but we're also a people that are blessed with a remarkable gift of resilience, determination, and faith. And above all, we are blessed with a deep sense of caring and responsibility for one another. Kol Yisrael arevim ze bazeh. We see it in these difficult moments, and so many have stepped forward to ask, how can I do something to alleviate others' suffering? How can I do something for this country or nation we love? The pain and vulnerability has become a call of action, a way to reach deeper, to give, and to show up for one another. And you, dear friends, exemplify this as you do it with a shared goal, offering empathy, hope, and healing to those Olim who so desperately need it. So, dear friends, our resilience as individuals and as a society is measured not only by how we function in ordinary times, but how do we respond in challenging times. And I thank each and every one of you for responding in your own way to the thousands of Olim who turn to you. They come from so many different countries and origins around the world and speak so many other languages except Hebrew. But they are all in need of the same human care, and I thank you and the organizers of tonight's events, and of my good friend Josh Aronson in particular. חברים, תמשיכו לעשות חי למען כולנו, למען העולים. תודה רבה.
Has anybody got any questions or anything they would like to say before I play Hatikva? Any comments or anything? I have never known a group of people who is silent.
So I'll break the silence. I thought it was very inspirational. Thank you very much, Susan, and for all the people that, organized it and put it together. And I think what I came back out with, which is something I was contemplating myself, is this concept of community, because my son-in-law is in the midst of Gaza, and he's only been home once since October 7th for Shabbos. And but the community, who they're all going through with the same thing, is giving one another so much hope and strength. And kind of what everyone was saying, reinforce my thoughts. And I really liked what President Herzog said. It's easy in the good times, for everyone to be nice and good, but we're really a very special nation, because even in the hard times, we come together so much for one another. And it brought a lot of hope, and gave me a lot of faith. And, as the war is going on more and more, another day, it is getting harder for everyone. So I want to thank you very much for organizing this, and because I got a lot out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you. Anybody else would like to say anything? Okay, so we'll conclude tonight's proceeding at Tikva. I know that Mike will probably burst into tears when I play this, because I tried it on him earlier on this afternoon, and he and I were sat there crying. So thank you to each and every one of you. You've really helped I think everybody just gained so much tonight. Thank you very much. Oh,
יהודי ואתם מזרח קדימה
עין לציון צופיה עוד לא אבדה תקוותנו
thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. Speak to you all soon. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Good night. Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan.
Good night.
Right.
Thank you to everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan. It was really inspirational.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you,
Bye.
Susan.
Thank you. Thank you, Lari. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. You okay, Mike? Good night, Leslie. Good night, Adrian. Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. It's been lovely to meet you.
Thank you so much. This was heartfelt, emotional. I am deeply grateful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Take care. Speak soon. Your mic's gone.